Joel, thank you very much for joining us in this podcast of XO Leaders. Fantastic to have you, and thank you for taking the time. You wrote in XO Leaders, and a lot of the authors said, why don't you get the authors together and interview them? So this is what we're doing, talking about a little bit about yourself and your company, your organization, the article, and any thoughts you might have at this time.
Well, congratulations on the latest edition.
Thank you very much.
It's quite a feat. 3 of them or 2 of them? I can't remember.
Well, it's the first U.S. book, but we actually have 7. We're publishing the first one next year in Latin America, hopefully. 1 in Thailand and 1 in Spain also. So,
congratulations.
Joel, tell me something that people might not know about you.
Well, I'll go deep to start. Why don't we do that?
Sure.
Let's not beat around the bush. So something that not many people would know about me is that when I was an elite long distance runner, I became severely anorexic. And I just competed at the World Championships, and I was sort of a life 135 pounds. And I saw all the Kenyans and Ethiopians, and I realized or started to just think that I was fat and that I needed to lose weight. And so I became anorexic, and I went down to about 115 pounds. I was already rail thin. And so, at that point, my cheeks were sunken in, and I became very injury prone and sick all the time. And it turned into body dysmorphia. And the reason I share that story is because, well, the body dysmorphia never really goes away. You can understand it, you can become aware of it, you can work on it. But it taught me about negative motivation and positive motivation. So a lot of times in our life, when we're shooting for a goal or to attain something, we're either running towards something or we're running from something. And in my case, it was insecurity that was fueling my motivation in life in a lot of different ways. And that insecurity has a lot of power and energy behind it, and it can drive you forward, but at some point it also becomes toxic. It also becomes a poison. It becomes your kryptonite. And this is, this self-awareness is critical to your journey as a human being, as a husband, as a father, as an entrepreneur, etc. And so that is why I share this story is just, for anybody who's listening and they think, well, wait a second, what are my drivers? Are these positive drivers? Am I running towards something, or am I running away from something? And if I'm running away from something, what is that in me? Is that an insecurity? Why is that there? And that enables you to get comfortable with it, understand it, and work with it better.
Wow. You wrote a book. I'm guessing that might be included in your book, but tell me a little bit about your organization and certainly your book too, Joel.
Yeah, well, the book, Getting Naked, The Bare Necessities of Entrepreneurship and Startups, is about naked underwear. So that's sort of the double entendre of the name, but essentially it's exactly what I just talked about with this, are you running toward, or are you running from something? Because the journey of entrepreneurship, I came to understand, is actually, it's a journey of, well, what is the type of person I can become in the pursuit of the thing that I'm pursuing? And that's really the most important part, is becoming this person capable, worthy. I mean, we're all worthy, but capable of achieving this goal that I want. And that to me was this idea of getting naked. It was shedding the ego. It was letting go of all those negative motivators and getting back to the core essence of why I was doing something, and becoming, the best person I can. I talk a lot about masculine excellence. And masculine excellence, it's a really tough thing today because we live in a world where toxic masculinity and male guilt are kind of thrown around very loosely and kind of attached to men specifically, where they're afraid to fail. They're afraid to kind of strike out on this journey because they're starting from this place of wrongness to begin with, that you're kind of guilty by proxy or the sins of their father. And really the spirit of what I'm talking about is that much like Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, we have to strike out on this journey of our life. And as we do that, we enter the cave of darkness. We enter the unknown as a beginner, as someone who doesn't know, and we have to learn. And in order to learn, we have to fail, and then we have to apply those lessons. And we're made vulnerable. We're humbled. We're humiliated, and we continuing down this path, and ultimately we become someone who is capable of going down and facing these challenging things that life throws at us. And we essentially, this is the point. The point isn't the end. The point is this continued journey. And so that's what the book is about. And the book weaves the entrepreneurial stories that broke me down and forced me to learn, right? They say failure has a function, right? It asks you if you want to keep going. And that's what we have to keep choosing. We don't really have a choice in life.
What broke you down, Joel? I know it wasn't scripted. But
No, of course. I will go back to, so I had essentially decided for myself that all of my value as a human being was wrapped up in whatever external success I was to have. Initially, that was as a runner, and so that became the feedback loop is, you win a race, you're good. Mm-hmm. You lose a race, you're not so good, mm-hmm. Right? And I'm not saying that anyone in particular put that on me. I put that on myself. At least that's, when I look back, that's what I think I did. And I just kept carrying that with me when the race was over. It became everything. And so when your whole self-worth is wrapped up in some material success or some kind of success, all of which is completely out of your control, right? We're not entitled to the results of our work. We're just entitled to the work, mm-hmm. itself. The results will be what they will be. That's it's sort of more or less the Bhagavad Gita. And so in my failures and in what I was desperate to achieve, I wore myself so thin that on 3 separate occasions I ended up in hospital because I just could not turn off the work. I could not turn off the stress. I could not turn off this angst and anxiety to be this thing that I had determined I needed to be lovable. Mm-hmm. Again, insecurity driving this. And so, after I'm not going to say I nearly died because that would be a little hyperbole, but when you're in a hospital bed and you put yourself there and you're the only one who can point the finger at for why you're there, you're like, well, wait a second. My priorities are all messed up. How I'm thinking about things is all messed up. And the real kicker on top of that was that my one of my dear friends and old travel mates, he died of a heart attack very shortly after I'd been in hospital for, I think, the 2nd time. Mm-hmm. And he had 2 girls the same age or very similar ages to mine. And I said, this is it. Like, what's the saying? You probably know it. It's like, it's a quote, men have 2 lives and the second one begins when they realize they only have one or something. It's something to that effect. And that was that kind of epiphany for me, this is all I have. And if I'm going to spend it trying to make people love me so that I can love myself, well, that's a pretty sad and just depressing way to live. And I realized I had to change.
Yeah. But it took you one more time.
Oh, well, it takes us many more times, right? I think that it took me one more time in that regard,
Yeah.
because we build these mental patterns that we have, these defense, we build these things that we think keep us safe, right? The patterns that we build in our mind from childhood onward, they become so comfortable for us that this is how I'm going to react in the world. One of my friends always says, it takes as long to wade out of the water as it did to wade in. In other words, how long have I been using this thought process? It can take just as long to unwind it. It often doesn't. So yeah, I fell victim to, my own devices and my own thinking again. And it's still there. You still see it. You just catch it earlier as you go forward, right?
You talk about faith in humanity. I like the change of pace in the interviews. You talk about faith in humanity with everything going on in Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, around Taiwan, just to name a few. Do you still have faith in humanity?
Absolutely. Humanity is awesome. And I think that what we see as presented as humanity in the news, this sort of headline diarrhea, this very factionalist, sensationalist, if it bleeds, it leads. And certainly, we live in a very fractured time, more so than in any time that I have been on this earth. But I don't think that the headlines represent humanity. I don't think the headlines represent how we all feel about things and how we all show up in this world. They're just clickbait. And so we need to be very careful in how we digest the news, and social media for that matter, right? Because I don't think it's an exact mirror of how we all feel. I think it is only reflecting the absolute most sensationalist side of all of this, not the nuance baked into it.
You've traveled around the world, and I completely agree. It is all about perception. What's your perception about Israel?
It's I really can't have a dog in the fight. And I think that it's such a social disgrace to not have an opinion, at least on the surface. But I think that that's just media shaming. And I think that that's just looking to encamp us into different sides of something when there's many sides to a thing. And of course, if Israel's been attacked, then I believe Israel has the right to defend itself. Mm-hmm. But I always default to one, who, where, when, and that piece is the most important thing to talk about, and using our diplomacy and using our minds and our hearts to guide a path as quickly as possible towards peace should always be front and center. And I understand that that's it's a very complicated situation, as is the Ukraine-Russia situation. But I also think that we don't all have to be crusaders for a side in these situations, especially one, if we're not educated in the situation, because we can perpetuate falsehoods and we can perpetuate a sentiment that we don't even truly understand. We're just kind of jumping on a bandwagon because that's where our followers want, or that's what our family wants. And I think that we can internalize this. And I think that, we can, instead of battling our office workers or our coworkers or our friends, we can do what feels right for us, and we can internalize it, and we can pray, and we can journal, and we can meditate, and we can just meditate with love in our hearts and peace in our minds for all that's happening. Because nobody wins in war. Nobody. There is no winner, even at the end of the day, if they declared a winner. Nobody has won because innocent people have died. And so I really like just taking a pause and saying, do I really need to engage in this, or can I just internalize it and offer energetically what I can, while others who are maybe more across the information, you know, are out there talking about these things, and hopefully talking about them in a way that provides all the information and tries to reach across the divide, as opposed to create further divide.
I don't have a standpoint on it. I'm trying to create one, I guess. Is it turning the other cheek? Is it defending? Or should you turn the other cheek? Should you be allowed to retaliate? And is it 1-to-1? Is it 10-to-1? Is it 100-to-1? And then you go into the discussion about the worth of a human being. You say you have faith in humanity, but do you really think that humanity understands the importance of love, understanding, and connection? And that's why you did your trip with your family to these many countries. Did you find that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I'll just say before I start into that, I think that this thinking that we know, this idea of, the allure of power, the allure of rightness, it traps us, it freezes us, it blinds us from seeing what the other side might have to say or what the other side might feel. And, anybody can have strongly held beliefs that this is right or wrong, but strongly held beliefs doesn't mean that those beliefs are right. And so back in 2016, when I went to film my documentary, Raising Global Citizens, there was all this hysteria on the news about, literally the media had deemed 2016 the year of fear. Mm-hmm. And there were some terrorist attacks in Paris and Spain and elsewhere. And my wife and I had two young girls, and we said, are they going to grow up in a world where they fear everything, or are they going to grow up in a world where their first response is one of love and compassion and openness to trying to understand all that is going on here? And, we went to Ouzville in Lebanon, in Beirut. And Ouzville was a Hamas-controlled district. And we filmed there, and we were invited there. And we didn't interview anybody specifically. There was just this wall that was, because Ouzville is all painted with graffiti, really beautiful graffiti. And we were invited to paint one of the walls with a whole bunch of children in the area. And so that's my personal experience with being close to that, is that there is good people everywhere, and that incidents aren't representative of nations. They aren't representative of the individuals inside those nations. We can't use one thing to judge everybody. And the only, or one of the best ways to achieve that is to go to these places firsthand and break bread with these people, with the people there, and hear what they have to say, hear their stories. And it changes the texture of your mind to see these things firsthand, because you can't just automatically go into default mode when you see a headline on the news or on social media and be like, well, obviously these people are all bad. It's like, well, no, I was there. They're not all bad, and hopefully it softens our response a little bit. And again, that doesn't negate bad action. Bad action is bad action. And we have to, bad action has to be accounted for. But it certainly takes the myopathy, I guess it would be the word, out of it, and it broadens that perspective on humans.
Yeah. I myself was a backpacker with my family. You've certainly done a lot more backpacking than I have with your wife and kids. And when people think travel, they usually think Cancun or Disneyland or something like that. Is there a specific type of travel that you would recommend to discover the world? But I guess you also discovered yourself?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I love Cancun. But, um, I always advise people to do less planning. You know, maybe you plan your first hotel, but I like to encourage people to embrace the world and kind of go on this kind of trust trip where they open themselves up to serendipity and they open themselves up to seeing what can come without an agenda. And this has multiple effects. You know, one, you begin, because everything is okay, you change your perspective on needing to control every outcome. You see that, you know, it's not also dangerous and bad out there. You see the good in people who help you find and get to the next place you're trying to go, maybe without your app. And you also gain more confidence in yourself and in your own, you know, your own faculties and capabilities. And you get to give yourself an adventure. You know, a Cancun or the like kind of trip can be very relaxing, and there's absolutely a time and place for that. But I believe that we all still should go on adventures, and this means getting off the tour bus and getting on the little mini bus, you know, and and going into places somewhat unknown. And of course, there are risks. There are risks of theft, and there are risks of different things that happen, but there are always risks. And the idea that we can control safety is a grand illusion as far as I'm concerned. And it is the one thing that is sold to us more than almost anything in the world. And we have to be a little bit more uncomfortable being uncomfortable, or a lot more. And that is one of these things that when you go out on these trips without an agenda, and you just see what comes, you learn so many more things about yourself and about the people around you and the people in this world that by and large is positive.
Do you still have time to travel?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, little bit less so. We, I have a very bad habit of turning everything into some kind of a documentary or show. So I end up doing a lot of travel for business. You know, recently Japan, soon India, you know, back to Italy, etc. And I try when I can to take my children with me, and I try, and often I end up documenting these things to tell a story. So, you know, because my mission seems to be that I just want to constantly and continually show the world to people the way that I have been so fortunate to experience it. So yes, but I also live on a farm now. Mm-hmm. And so we have chickens and we have gardens, and so we're a little bit more tied to the farm, and it's just a different chapter for us.
You mentioned that mindset is what distinguishes success stories.
Well, mindset is everything. I'll give you a great example. I'm just reading my girls The Hatchet. And it's about this 13 or 15-year-old boy who is going to visit his father in the Canadian North, and his plane crashes. And the only thing that he has, he survives the crash, the pilot does not. And the only thing he has left is this hatchet. And he realizes that the number one tool that he has for his survival is his perspective, is his mind, and how he thinks about things. And then so in the beginning, after he's crashed, you know, nature's really beating him down, and everything is quite a struggle to build a fire, to learn how to hunt for his food, catch fish, find berries, etc. And then he figures all of these things out. But then his little shelter that he's built and his food stores and all of this, one day a tornado comes through and it destroys it all. And the same day he was actually attacked by a moose. And the next morning, after the tornado has destroyed his camp, he says to himself, well, you know, you think you got me, but what you don't realize is that my mind is too powerful. I've changed, and I know that I can do anything. No matter what you throw at me, I will find a way. And there's this great story kind of like that, where I guess this relates, and to try and keep it short, there's a guy walking down a beach, and I guess it's night out, or sorry, it's dark out, and I guess he's going to a fishing boat, but he's too early, and so it's dark, and he's just killing time, and he sees this bag of stones, bag of pebbles or whatever. He doesn't quite realize what it is, and so he picks up the bag, and he can't see in it because it's dark, and he's tossing all the stones into the water, and as light comes, the sun, dawn breaks, the sun is rising, and he sees that these stones were big precious gems worth a lot of money, and he only has 3 left. And he has 2 choices, right? He can be mad, or he can realize that this is, he has enough he still has the 3 stones left, essentially, right? So it's either be upset about what has happened and what you've lost, or be optimistic about what you have. And it's all a matter of our frame of mind. In entrepreneurship, bless you, in entrepreneurship, we're going to be beaten down a million times. Mm-hmm. It's happened. No matter if you're Elon Musk, the world's the greatest entrepreneur in the world today, arguably is Elon Musk. He has 4 incredibly different companies, and there's no man on the planet more attacked, more up and down than Elon Musk, right? And so it's his mind that drives him, not the success, not the billions in his bank. And that's what we all have at the end of the day.
You began with an end in mind, you said in your article. What was it? What is it?
This brings us back to the beginning of our conversation, where, originally when I started Naked Underwear, I set out with this idea that I was going to build a company and sell it. And I did that. And I think that provides context and clarity for an entrepreneur's journey, right? It provides a framework. I am structuring this. I am raising money. I am building this because I know the end goal that I'm trying to hit. And it can be great guardrail. It can be a great guardrail to your success with anything. And what's the old adage with the moonshot, or you aim for the moon and you end up getting the stars. And so what life has taught me, what I talk about in my book, what I realize now is you still do begin with the end in mind, but you have to be very open to the opportunities that present themselves on the zigs and the zags of your business and your life. Because all success, or I should say most of success, happens on the long tail. Right? It happens over the long term. And it's not generally the thing that you expected, or not often the thing you expected. And we look at, let's use Amazon as an example. Well, Amazon started out as a bookstore, and what's been one of its most successful things, Amazon Web Services. Mm-hmm. Right? The moonshot was likely not Amazon Web Services when it started. And the Apple iPhone with Apple, we begin with that end in mind, but the opportunities that often lead to the biggest successes and the biggest jumps are unexpected. And so we have to have that openness and willingness to fail, and willingness to take on a new path as it unfolds along the way in front of us.
Do you change your mind? Have you changed your mind? What's your mindset now? What is your end goal? What are you striving for?
Again, I think these things, these didactic little sayings that I have said, that was my saying board from somebody else. And I live by it. When I start a project, I have a goal for that project. But none of it matters. Like, let's be honest. None of it matters. And, if we talked about on this podcast, the atrocities that are happening, Israel, Palestine, the Ukraine, Russia, and all over the world. And these are also reminders that, much like in my own story, all that matters is the love that we have, the family that we get to spend time with. And the rest is fleeting. The rest is incredibly fleeting. And if you spent your whole life trying to achieve the sale of your business, like I once did, and missed your children growing up, and divorced your partner, and got sick like I did, and I had all those things happen. I missed years of my eldest daughter's life, and I almost got divorced because I was so focused on one thing. And yes, purpose and drive becomes a vehicle in which to explore and live our lives, but it is not the thing that matters. I do not believe in legacy, pursuing legacy. I believe in focusing more on the present and presence with our family, because it can all be taken away from us in the blink of an eye. And at the end of the day, you see a poster, if you're watching this behind me, of a movie I've made, and whatever. I'm so glad I did, but it's all junk. It all doesn't matter. What matters is what I have for time with my family. And that is how I'm changing my mind on things. And I think that, we, at least here in the West, we're the American dream is a very directionally linear ideology, of which we enter life with the ambition of achieving certain things. In the cliched sense of the American dream, that's the white picket fence and the pension plan and the decent car and the vacations and all that stuff. And that's all great, but it does miss the point, and it keeps us away from what matters most. And I think when we return to what matters most, we do soften. We go back to Ukraine and this idea of take away the business and go to politics and fighting for your side, fighting for Republican or Democrat or whatever. And these ideas that we're fighting for versus the things right in front of us, they become massive distractions that twist and turn our insides and make us angsty and angry and put our finger up at the clouds and say, what's happening? And what's happening is right in front of us with the moment that we're in. And so I constantly am trying to find my way back there and now so more than ever.
Mm-hmm. Still, do you have to be willing to burn up in the sun on your way to the moon to be a real entrepreneur?
That's a good question. And I know you're pulling from part of the chapter that I wrote where
Yes.
I said, that as we're going to the moon, we end up flying close to the sun. And I think yes, but not in the sense of burnout. Like I burned up in the sun. I ended up in hospital. I was depressed for 5 years. I was anxious. I absolutely burned up in the sun. But the willingness to do that is the willingness to live on our edge. And there's a Buddhist saying that is something to the effect of the perfect life or the best life is the life with just the right amount of suffering. Because suffering is what teaches us, right? It informs us. A simple example is you don't build muscle in a workout unless you break down your muscle. You destroy your muscle to build your muscle. You destroy your ego to free yourself from your ego. As Eckhart Tolle said, you must die before you die. In other words, you must kill the ego so that before your actual life comes to an end, you can be free of that ego, that very ego that gave me the insecurity, that gave me the body dysmorphia, that was a driver also became a poison to me. And so I think in life, we have to be willing to kill that ego, and burn it up in the sun by taking risks, by pushing ourselves into places that make us uncomfortable, like the travel example we talked about, so that we can shed that which does not serve us anymore and step into what we are becoming and can become.
Mm-hmm. Why was it important for you to participate in a book like XO Leaders?
Well, you're a good salesman. No, I'm just, no, you're a very inspiring guy. Where you can give back in the capacity of which you can give back. You know, we can't all be so altruistic as to give away $300 million or billions of dollars like is so common these days, at least, you know, amongst the super elite entrepreneurs. So we have to say, where can we give back? And reading other people's words has been the thing that helped me get to where I am presently. And so when I was asked to share some of my words and thus some of my time, I was happy to do it because that was something I could do to give back.
Thank you so much.